evening for the January 19th, 2021 Monte Sereno City Council regular meeting. Before the regular meeting is called to order, I would like to point out a few house rules to assist the council members, staff, and members of the public to successfully participate. Council members, your microphone is live, so please keep your microphones on mute until you wish to speak. For tonight's meeting, we are using Zoom to host the City Council regular meeting. At the bottom of the Zoom client, there are two icons, chat and raise hand. Please use chat only to report technical issues such as being unable to hear a council member speaking. Please use raise hand to be recognized by the mayor and enabled to speak to the council. To comment under oral communications or on any agenda item, you are allowed 3 minutes to speak per agenda item. Emails limited to 350 words can also be submitted to the city clerk and it will be read into the record. This word limit is set to adhere to the typical 3-minute time allowance. Only attendees using Zoom application can use the raise hand option to comment. Participants calling in from a telephone will only be able to listen and cannot provide feedback or public comment. Lastly, because we are all not in the same room, all votes at this meeting will be taken by roll call.
Thank you. The meeting is called to order. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Mekachek.
Present.
Councilmember Turner.
Here.
Councilmember Lawler.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Elahi.
Present.
And Mayor Luthold.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Okay, no presentations. So any change to the orders of the day? Seeing none, we'll move on to oral communications. This is the time for any members of the public who wish to speak on matters which are not on the agenda. So matters not involving anything on the consent calendar, not related to weed abatement and not related to the Dave's Avenue special use permit, fence regulations, etc. If you have comments that do not relate to those subjects, please raise your hand and we will recognize you to speak. Madam City Clerk, do we have any, are you seeing any hands raised? I'm still not.
I do not see any hands raised.
Okay, thank you. Moving on, do we have any written communications which have not been added to the packet?
I do not have any.
Okay, thank you. So next order of business is the consent calendar. Do we have any council members wishing to either ask very brief clarifying questions or to request to formally pull a matter from the consent calendar for detailed discussion? Seeing none, do I have a motion to adopt the consent calendar?
So moved.
To approve.
So we have a motion from Ms. Lawler first and a second from Ms. Turner.
Okay. Councilmember Mekachek.
Aye.
Councilmember Turner.
Yes.
Councilmember Lawler.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Elahi.
Yes.
And Mayor Luthold.
Yes.
That motion passes 5-0.
Okay, moving to the public hearings, item 8 on the agenda. This is a public hearing on the weed abatement program and to adopt a resolution overruling objections and determining to proceed with weed abatement. Do we have a staff report on this subject?
Yes, we do a brief staff report. Mayor, this is our annual weed abatement program. And it's just essentially a notification providing the list and getting this on the public record to notify the public that they are being put on notice that we will be abating the weeds if they do not choose to do so themselves. That concludes my comments.
Okay, any council member questions for Mr. Leonardis on that subject?
I think last year when we came across this, we also had a fire issue and safety issue, and there was concern about whether trees were going to catch fire because of PG&E lines. And I know Mr. Leonardo's had the PG&E person come by and walk some streets. And just a couple of days ago or yesterday, there was a lot of winds, and there was actually a fire in this area. So I don't know if this is probably not a weed abatement issue, but that's something we need to keep in mind, so that those overhanging wires and trees are sufficiently apart so we don't have more fire issues coming up in this valley. It was really windy last night.
Certainly
Indeed.
was. Thank you, Councilmember Elahi. And we did have some trees go down in Monte Sereno because of the winds. I did approach PG&E on a number of occasions this year, and they were able to clear branches out of power lines, including those in the vicinity of where you live as well. So they were great in their response. I have a direct link to PG&E. And they also removed some very large eucalyptus trees over off of Greenwood Road. Is it Greenwood or it was a Ridgecrest, I'm sorry, I apologize, Ridgecrest, that were interfering with the power lines. So PG&E has been very proactive about removing the vegetation around the high voltage lines, but we will stay on top of it. Thank you for your suggestion.
Yeah, that's good. Just stay on top of it, because it's a lot of area to cover. So I think we need to be vigilant ourselves also. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions before we go to members of the public? If we have any members of the public wishing to speak regarding weed abatement, please raise your hands and we will get you queued up. Any other council member questions initially? All right. I am not seeing any members of the public wishing to speak on weed abatement yet. I have a question, Mr. Leonardis. There were several properties that were indicated in the attachments to the agenda here for the weed abatement program. Do you have any information for us about whether those have all been resolved or are all moving forward, or any comments that you've received from members of the public regarding those properties that were listed?
Thank you, Mayor. Not at this time. We have not received any correspondence or any notification that anybody would be moving forward. We begin this process early in the year, and this will come back. They have the right to essentially object to their property being on the weed abatement list, and that takes some time. So we essentially give them the notice this evening, and then we will be bringing this item back for formal adoption. I believe we do it in the April timeframe.
All right, thank you.
Excuse me, if I actually recall correctly, the council adopted a resolution, noticing the existence of the nuisance and notifying property owners that they're on this list in December. So this action would actually be for the council to confirm that these properties are now subject to abatement by the city, basically authorizing the city manager and the fire marshal to go enter those properties and conduct the abatement. Now, nothing, of course, would prohibit city staff from, as a courtesy, notifying people that they, are now immediately subject to abatement and they need to take care of this problem as soon as possible. But by this action, the council would basically be authorizing the city manager to cause this abatement to happen on the properties that are not already in compliance.
Thank you for that clarification. Okay, so seeing no hands up for public comment, let me confirm. Madam City Clerk, just want to confirm you don't see any hands up?
No.
Okay, thank you. In the past, we have had people objecting at this stage. So, all right, do we have any further council member discussion on this matter? If not, then do we have a motion to adopt the weed abatement program and to pass the resolution overruling objections and determining to proceed? Councilmember Makachek.
Yes, if there's an opportunity to give a courtesy call to the people, that would be great. I would encourage the city manager and the artist to do so.
Thank you.
I agree with that, and I'll move to move a motion to go ahead with the weed abatement program.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
I heard Liz loudest on that, so we can give Liz the second on that and vote, please.
Okay. Councilmember Mekachek,
Aye.
Councilmember Turner,
Yes.
Councilmember Lawler,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Elahi,
Yes.
and Mayor Luthold.
Yes.
That motion passes 5-0.
All right, thank you. Moving to item 9 on the public hearing section. This is to conduct a public hearing and on the request for a special use permit, site development permit, and a variance for the construction of approximately 611 square foot addition to the first floor and approximate 919 square foot addition to the second floor of an existing 2-story, 3,423 square foot historic adobe house at 18240 Daves Avenue. Do we have a staff report on this? Oh, sorry, Mr. Mekachek.
Hi. Before we get started on this, or as we get started on this, I would like to make a disclosure that I was on the Site and Architectural Commission, which was a recommending body, and this item was recommended to council. So I just wanted to disclose that since I was on one of the commissioners. The other item is that although I was on the Site and Architectural Commission, I will consider this, for lack of a better term, as a trial de nouveau. So my decision tonight will not have anything to do with my previous decision, and everything I consider tonight during this meeting will go into my decision this evening if we vote on this.
Great, thank you. And actually, this is a good time for us all. Before we get started, let's run through our various council member disclosures of contacts with the public or the applicant on this subject matter. Does anybody have disclosures to make about that? Councilmember Lawler.
Yes, I'd like to disclose that at the previous hearing back last year, I had met with both the applicant and the neighbor. And then after the October 7 Site and Architecture meeting, I actually met with the applicant, Mr. Gall, to take a look on the outside of his property. He was going to show me where he was going to plant some trees. And so I just needed to disclose that.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Elahi.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I also, prior to the previous meeting, I have met with both the applicant and Ms. Shaker. Visited both the properties, and they showed their plan, and Shaker showed her objections. And since then, I have had emails for further discussion, and I basically responded that we'll be listening to the presentations and reviewing them at this time, and hopefully hearing from all parties at that time.
All right. Councilmember Turner, any disclosures on this?
Yes, I met with both parties the first time. We discussed this last year, and right after that meeting, I met with Mr. Gall. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Mekachek, any disclosures of specific contacts with the applicant or members of the public on this?
Yes, I had met with the applicant before the Site and Architectural Commission meeting, and I've had conversations with them, but I have not been to the site since. I ride by that property at least 3 times a week, cycling into El Sereno.
Okay, thank you. And for myself, I had met with both the applicant and the downhill neighbor, Ms. Shakar, prior to the first consideration of this. And in preparation for today's hearing, I did meet with both of them so that I could view the new story polls that outline the new outline. and spoke with each of them for roughly 30 minutes each, primarily in the review of the story polls, and on both sides heard their on the neighbor side, the concerns, and on the applicant side, what has been done to address what had been previously a concern with the council's last review. So those are my disclosures. And with that, I think we're ready to move to staff report. Ms. Hamilton, if we can recognize you.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and council members. It's a pleasure to be before you this evening to present the following project to you. What's before you this evening is a project that seeks a site development permit, a special use permit, and a variance for an approximate 611 square foot addition to the first floor and 919 square foot addition to the second floor of an existing 3,423 square foot historic adobe home. This project came before you back in February of 2020 for a much larger addition, at which time the Sitting Council denied the request and directed the applicant to go back, work with staff and neighbors to develop a project that would address the issues of vertical mass, visual and privacy impacts, lack of stepped elements, and encroachment into the setback. The applicant has done just that and developed a proposal that was presented to the Site and Architectural Commission at their October 7th, 2020 meeting. After reviewing the project and changes as discussed in the report to Site and Architecture, the Commission voted to unanimously approve the project as proposed, with one additional condition, which is to plant two 48-inch box trees of a native species to improve privacy screening at the corner of the addition. The changes to the project from the previous proposed include the following, and I tried to highlight this in the report to Site and Architectural Commission. There's been a significant reduction in the encroachment into the side setback, limiting it to 100 square feet at the first floor and 128 square feet at the second floor. You know, coupled with this is a reminder that the applicant has already removed an existing first floor patio encroachment that was approximately 127 square feet and a second floor rooftop balcony of approximately 141 square feet. The first floor addition has been lowered approximately 1 foot, necessitating a step down into the new space, both at the first and second floors, which also allowed for the lowering of the ridge line approximately 4 feet to be more in alignment with the existing ridge line of the previous second story addition. This new proposal eliminates any second story balcony additions, again, to reduce any privacy concerns. It also has included a privacy wall at the first floor outdoor dining deck to minimize views into or onto either property. And as had been previously done, the property owner has installed property line plants to provide for screening along that area where the addition is proposed. So as was acknowledged by the Site and Architectural Commission with their unanimous support of the project, the necessary findings for approval of a site development permit, special use permit, and variance can be made as has been outlined in the draft resolution presented to Council. This concludes staff presentation, and I'm available for any questions.
Mayor Luthold, you're on mute.
Thank you. Okay. that gives me time to practice. That's good. Any council member questions at this time? And we can come back to Ms. Hamilton later on after the presentations as well, if it's more appropriate at that time. But I see Ms. Lawler, any initial questions?
Yeah, just a clarification on attachment 1. It says it's a 611 square foot addition on the first floor and a 919 square foot addition on the second floor of an existing 3,400 square foot home. But on the second page, you're saying it's a 3,100 square foot home with a 1,300 square foot 2-story addition. So I'm just trying to figure out why those numbers don't match, or what am I missing?
Okay, I don't have attachment.
So okay, so it's the staff report, special use site development and variance request. And it says attachment 1 at the bottom. And then on page 3 of that, 3 of 11, it says the applicant is proposing to construct a 1,300 square foot 2-story addition to the existing 3,100 square foot home. So I just wanted to know which is which. Is it a 3,400 square foot home or a 3,100 square foot home? Or is that including? I was just trying to figure out why the numbers didn't match. That's all. It's not a big deal. I just wanted to clarify which one is correct. We can come back.
I'm trying to find where you're.
Okay, so on the first.
So is it the site and architectural staff report, which is the?
Yes, it is.
Attachment 1?
That's
Okay.
the one. Yeah.
So on
So on the-
page 2 of
on the-
that?
On the first, see the first paragraph, it says 3,400 square foot historic adobe home. And then on page 3, under analysis, submitted design, it says it's a 3,100 square foot home. So I'm just, which one is which?
It's the 3,423 square feet.
Is it correct?
Yeah.
Okay, and then,
we didn't get corrected.
okay, and then is the 1,300 square foot 2-story addition, is that the 611 and 919 combined? Because that comes out to 1,500.
Yeah. Let me pull out the applicants. Some of this got. It's the 1,506.
Is the
Yes.
1,530
Yes.
correct square foot? Okay,
611 and 919.
all right, thank you.
Those are the current numbers.
Got it, thanks.
Mhm.
Okay, Councilmember Mekachek.
Yes, were there any changes from what went to site and architecture to what is in front of council now? And I realize the addition of the 2 48-inch boxes, but other than that, were there any changes made to the application?
No.
Okay, any other initial questions? Seeing none. Okay, we will proceed to the applicant's presentation. The applicant will have 10 minutes to present. The neighbor in opposition will have 5 minutes after that, and then we will go to the rest of the public comment. So we have a hand up for a Peggy. I'm not sure if that is our applicant for applicant comment. Ms. Radcliffe, do you have the applicant queued up for presentation?
I do not.
Okay.
Yeah, there are two. There are 2 Peters, and we're not sure which one is the correct one for the applicant.
Okay, so would Peter Gall on the computer that you want to present from, please raise your hand, or If we're not presenting from there, we did have a Peggy with a hand up. If that's where the presentation is supposed to be, please keep your hand up. Otherwise, please lower your hand and we will respond. Also, could use the chat box to coordinate this.
Mayor, it looks like we do have the applicant
Okay.
panelist.
Okay, and I'm showing one hand up from Peggy. If you have your hand up just to speak first, you will be speaking after the applicant's presentation and the response by Ms. Schechter. Okay, so let's go ahead and begin with the applicant's presentation. And this will be 10 minutes for the applicant. Let's see, do I need to unmute Peter, Ms. Radcliffe, or will you take care of that?
He is unmuted.
Okay, Peter, you're unmuted and can begin with your presentation at your convenience.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm sorry. Could I ask Sean, Peggy could go first, please? Is that possible?
Sure.
Thank you.
All right. And is Peggy going to share time with this presentation?
She is.
Like.
She
Okay,
is.
great. All right, let's go ahead and queue up Peggy to begin speaking, and then we will return to Peter on his applicant time with the combination of the two for the 10 minutes.
Yeah, when I start.
So I don't know if I can speak yet.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for all the confusion. I should have used my full name, Peggy O'Laughlin. And good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Council members. I'm a land use attorney and I have been assisting Peter Gohl and his family on this restoration and remodel project. And you should have in your packet a letter from me in support of the project and asking for your approval of the 2 permits and of course the variance. And this project, as stated in my letter, it's unique given the historical designation of this existing adobe home. There's few such homes like this in Monte Sereno, and this project will both protect and preserve this historical integrity of this home, at the same time making it more livable. But most importantly, and this will be something Peter will address to you, is that the project has been redesigned extensively to minimize potential visual and privacy impacts. And both Peter and his architect, Craig Meinweiser, dealt in great detail and listened to all the concerns the City Council had, also the adjacent downslope neighbor. And they believe that this design meets all of the appropriate criteria, the design guidelines, and of course, the Secretary of Interior guidelines for historical reservations. We did review the opposition letter of the downslope neighbor, Ms. Shikar. We respectfully disagree with their conclusions and disagree with some of their interpretation of the applicable code provisions. And specifically, the architect, Craig Meinweiser, who is an expert in historic preservation, will address specifically some of the misinformation we believe was in that report regarding the historic preservation process. And that is it for me. I'm available for questions, but I really want to turn it over to Peter for some of the more detail and to the architect. Thank you.
Should I go? Is it time, Sean? So this is Peter Gohl. Am I good to go?
Yes, you can continue, Mr. Gohl.
Oh, thank you. Good evening, dear council members. Peter Gohl, I'm the homeowner for 18240 Daves Avenue in Monte Sereno. I'm representing a project that was presented last year As you may recall, my home is one of 3 historic properties in the city of Monte Sereno, and I believe the only adobe structure. My property is only visible by 4 addresses. 3 of those are on a private street, and 1 is the downslope neighbor, Ms. Shekar. I have listened after the last meeting, as was previously mentioned by Jeannie, to City Council after the last meeting. I did have the opportunity to meet with each of the council members at my home. I took in the feedback that they provided. I met with city staff on several occasions, as well as all of my neighbors, including the downslope neighbor. As a result, I did eliminate, as was mentioned, an existing porch that only went 28 inches from the property line. I reduced the size of the first floor that was previously acceptable to a point where it was previously 239 square feet within the setback, and now it's only 100 square feet. I moved the exterior deck away from the property line, so it's entirely outside of the required setback. The first floor was lowered to reduce it in appearance, and it also allowed me to reduce the ridge line of the addition by almost 4 feet. In order to improve the privacy, as was mentioned, for the downslope neighbor, I did install on the plans a full height privacy wall along the property line. All the glass facing the property is obscured. I eliminated the second story porch, as was mentioned. The second story, in addition, is now stepped back and has greatly reduced in size. And I installed 35 screening plants, some of them which already exceeding 10 feet in height, and I believe that they'll bloom quite nicely this coming spring. And I did, in addition, complete a line of sight rendering, which I believe that you have all seen, and which documents that all the privacy concerns from the second floor are met, and there's no visibility from the pool or my downslope neighbor. As a result of these changes, I did bring my project to the Site and Architecture Committee on October 7th, as was mentioned, and I was able to gain full staff support and approval, and full unanimous approval recommendation by Site and Architecture. And I leave open for any questions that you might have, and I hope to gain approval so that I can move forward with my project tonight. Thank you very much. Craig?
Now can everybody hear me? Not yet?
Mayor Luthold, you're on mute.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Well, Mayor and Council, thank you very much for allowing me to speak tonight. As you've heard, I'm the preservation architect on the project, and I've actually been working with Peter on restoring his home since November of 2016. As you've probably heard him say before, he's done an awful lot of work to this building. It was in very poor condition when he got it, and he has seismically reinforced it. He has articulated the details in the exterior and in the interior, because they are wonderful little historic detailing. And he has completely refurbished it inside and out. And we are working currently on another project that came before you to install a new garage separate from the building. And one of the reasons we did it separately was because we are trying to follow the Secretary of the Interior standards for all the work that we do on this property, so that we don't destroy the integrity and the value of this building. As you probably know, this house is the recipient of a Mills Tax Act contract, and that requires that the historic building owner reinvest the property tax money that he saves in property taxes back into the building. That, coupled with the use of the Secretary of the Interior standards, provides a clear path for protecting the historical integrity of a building, while at the same time promoting upgrades and changes to continue its useful life. Because by encouraging the continued use of historic buildings while preserving their character, these rules help protect the display of cultural history of Monte Sereno and the historical character of the community, and they help increase the economic worth of a community's historic buildings, thereby increasing the economic worth of every house in Monte Sereno. So everybody wins by this arrangement. In order to do that, to make it a building that can be lived in a modern way, and not just be a museum piece, it requires some modern upgrades. I wish you could have seen the kitchen when we first walked in with the complete 1957 or 50s appliances and the very, very small center island, and you could just barely get around it. That filled the whole kitchen. And so it was quite reasonable for us to assume that we needed to add a good-sized kitchen for modern use that we could eat in, and a dining space that was usable by more than 2 people, and a master bedroom suite upstairs, so that would bring the house up to the standards that his neighbors enjoy. So I wanted to comment a second on some of the things that are appearing here before you tonight, and note that with regards to the State Office of Historic Preservation reviewing this project, the state has said over and over that they want the local jurisdiction to do the review, and that is what they've done. So also the National Park Service, I know my time is up and I'll hurry. The National Park Service also offered the neighbor no interpretation of the rules of the road here, because that's not their function. Instead, I've probably told you before that I've been the architectural advisor to the Landmarks Commission of the City of Santa Clara for over 30 years. My job there is to interpret the Secretary of the Interior standards for the commission. So that's what I'm doing here. And as far as the standards 9 and 10, I wanted to point out.
Your time is up, so let's go ahead and.
Yeah, I can answer anything specifically when you ask.
Great, thank you. Do we have any council member comments of the 3 speakers on the applicant's behalf at this time? No questions at this point, so let's move on to Ms. Shakar's presentation in opposition. She will have 5 minutes to speak, and when ready, you may begin.
Are you raising your hand? Yes. No, well, we're button.
I think we have you.
Yes. Hello, Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yes, and your screen sharing has just come up.
Okay. You all can see my screen, correct?
Yes. So
okay,
go ahead and begin.
You. All right. Thank you. We understand Mr. Gall's desire to build an addition to have a larger and nicer kitchen and master bedroom suite, and we are very supportive of it. Mr. Gall should do this without adversely impacting our family. We live on a hillside. Mr. Gall's property already towers over ours. His home looks into our backyard. His ground floor is already 30 feet above the level of our pool. Our concern is for the privacy and safety of our family, especially our teenage daughters, as they swim, sunbathe, and entertain their friends in our backyard. While Mr. Gall is a very nice man, he could sell his home someday, and we don't know who might move in there. So we have to be concerned about these things, not just for the immediate future, but for the long term. We appreciate the changes Mr. Gall has made, but it does not address our concerns. The immense impact to the privacy and safety of our family still remains. Mr. Gall's proposed addition violates the setbacks and height limitations in the Monte Sereno building code with a vast difference. And Mr. Gall is asking you, the council members, to grant a variance, allowing him to violate these setbacks and height limitations. Cities put setbacks and height limitations in their building codes for a reason, to protect the character of the neighborhoods. But the most important reason is to protect the rights of the neighbors, their rights to privacy and to the peaceful enjoyment of their property. If homes are built too high or too close to the property line, they intrude on their neighbors' rights. And that's the problem we have here. We are in a hillside. The slope is 23%. The slope density calculations must be used. R120 development standards with hillside design should be applied. Mr. Gall's plan claims the side setback should be 15 feet for the first floor. That is incorrect. 15 feet is a side setback for a flat lot with bare minimum lot size. For Mr. Gall's property with that larger lot, the side setback should be 25 or 25 feet for the first floor, yet his first floor addition is 11 feet from the property line. The second story is even worse. The setback required as per the code is 25 or 30. Mr. Gall's second story will be 14 feet from the property line. Further, the height of Mr. Gall's addition is 29 to 32 feet. The code says the maximum height of two-story building is 21 feet, that is 8 to 11 feet over the code limit, and that a home built on a downward slope must be designed to step down on a hill. Mr. Gall's addition is not step down. Adding code 6.1 to accommodate Mr. Gall's proposed height, the setback space would be further increased at least 31 feet for the first floor and 36 feet for the second floor. If there is any disagreement about this from any parties, then we might have to take this discussion offline and go over applicable city codes paragraph by paragraph to avoid further code violations. Lastly, there are other serious violations as well. Mr. Gall has registered his home as historical property and gained significant state tax benefits. So his property is covered under state's historical preservation codes. Mr. Gall is proposing to cover up an old adobe home wall and windows. This is against the state code. Mr. Gall is asking you, our council, to grant a variance to the state code, allowing him to cover up the structure of historical significance. You, our council, have the power to do that. However, there are things you should consider before granting either of the variances Mr. Gall is requesting. Before you can grant the historical variance, California requires that council obtain approval from the State Historical Building Safety Board. It's a law. I see nothing in Mr. Gall's proposal indicating that such approval has been obtained. Office of Historic Preservation of Sacramento mentioned that historic properties are not special projects, so there are no special circumstances here requiring variance. Mr. Gall just wants to have a bigger and nicer kitchen and bedroom for personal preferences. His current non-adobe structure and land provides a lot of other options to meet his needs. According to California Code 65906, your decision to grant that variance would be a precedent setting. Anytime someone wants to ignore the setbacks simply for their own convenience and has some slope, you would be obligated to approve the variance. Failing to approve the variance would be grounds for a lawsuit because you have set the precedent with this case. Approving these variances would probably get you into a lawsuit anyways as well because you set the precedent that setbacks could be ignored. Please think about that. It's not right. I request the council at the personal level to object the proposed plan to safeguard my family's rights and privacy. Thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to speak today. I appreciate it.
Thank you for your presentation. Do we have any questions of council directly addressed to Ms. Shakar at this time? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and move to public comment. And so we will be taking public comment in order. If I can get my screen to show. And the first three people to speak will be Walter Huff, Nava Bernstein, followed by Patrick Miller. So we'll go ahead and queue those people up. You will each have 3 minutes to speak. And I do note for the public's consideration, we understand that there are many people who are for Mr. Gall and many people who are for Ms. Shakar. Each has submitted information about that. So I would appreciate if people can keep their comments limited to the issues that have not been addressed by people before them. That will be much more efficient. And we do note that many people on each side share the same concerns. So Mr. Huff, you are recognized and may begin when you wish.
Honorable Mayor, council members, as you know, I'm a developer. I have property outside the state, and it came to my I guess, through a friend, and said, hey, do you know anything about historical? And I said, yeah, I know a lot about historical. I have a home in Hilton Head. I do projects in Charleston at this point, and every building in there is historical. And the reason I'm talking is that I took a look at the property. I have never met Craig Meinweiler, but I heard a lot about him. And here's my perspective on it. It takes a special person to put the time and the effort into an historical home. There's not a lot of value, and there's not necessarily a lot of value when they sell it, because it has to stay historical. It's for the love of it. And I can assure you the projects that I do in Hilton Head are for the same way. They're 1,800 feet, they're 1,600 feet, and there are reasons why they were so small, even though at that time they were laborilously large. So I really applaud Peter for doing what he's doing. And I hear all of this other fire. First of all, nobody bought the lot above, nobody bought the lot below. I think it fits into all the categories that one could fit into. And I want to talk about improvements. For example, if you have tube and nail, if you have an old electrical system, you have to improve that. You have to do things to make that happen. And if there's any cornerstone that you have in a house, you have a cornerstone of a kitchen and certainly a bathroom. If there's nothing else, that's what you have. We don't have a den here going. We don't have a man's room. We don't have a boys or ladies night out room. We have a dwelling where somebody's going to live and enjoy themselves. They're going to be able to take this property down the road and sell it, not necessarily for a huge profit, for all the money that goes in. As a matter of fact, most of my clients in Charleston take a loss, okay, when their kids get it. I just did one for an 89-year-old couple, and the loss was almost $400,000 in a hot market. So there is a labor of love that goes into these things. I asked for the council to approve this. Again, I couldn't have done it better, quite frankly. And I do want to make one comment, though, is that seeing somebody's daughters or somebody's friends down in the pool, first of all, you have to assume that somebody wants to look at that. I certainly don't. And I could care less. And I think that anyone else would be the same. You don't have any kind of issue with him that way. You don't have issue with most people that way. It's a ridiculous argument, and forgive me for saying it, but I was just so appalled by that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next will be Ms. Bernstein. As soon as we get your timer up and get you recognized, you may begin.
Hi, I'm a Monte Sereno resident, and I'm a concerned neighbor. I live in Via Vaquero, so a couple of houses down the street. And first of all, I'm a resident, and I'm concerned neighbor about all the regulation that it's very intrusive and you violate code, city code. And secondly, my daughters actually go sometimes and swim in the pool with the Shekar family. And I actually feel that it's very, very intrusive to the privacy of the family. I've been in their house and I saw the tape, and I was actually shocked. I was shocked. If a neighbor will build a house like this next to my house, next to Monte Sereno, I would sue the city. I don't know how Rupa is so nice to you. I guess Monte Sereno has a lot of money to be sued by resident, and it's a slope. It doesn't have a setback. It doesn't apply the regulation of a setback. I saw those marks, and it's just on the property line. There's no setback pretty much. And plus it's a tall building. So I feel strongly that it's very intrusive to the privacy. And as a resident of Monte Sereno as well, if that happened to me, I would be really, really upset. And also the issue of a historic house, it's very nice that we have historic house, but that's not a reason to approve something that out of the ordinary to Mr. Gall. And other than that, I wish both of them very well as neighbor, and I want everybody to live peacefully and happy. But you have to follow the city codes. If he breaks the city codes based on the assumption that he has adobe house and historic house, it's not a reason. And also the slope is just, it's not flat land. You see that the slope is really intrusive. That's all I have to say, and thank you to all the city members and the council.
Thank you. Next up will be Patrick Miller, followed by Vasu, oh, sorry about the last name, Cherlopale, and then Kyra Cherlopale. Mr. Miller, you may begin when you're ready.
Good evening. I hope you can hear me. My name is Patrick Miller. I'm at 18232 Daves Avenue. If you reference the letter Mr. Gall sent on the 15th of January, we are one of the 4 homes directly adjacent to his property. In fact, we are directly across a shared driveway. So I would argue we have probably the clearest and fullest view of his property and have a good sense now of what is being proposed. And I would say my wife and I are completely supportive of what's being requested here for both the permits as well as the variance. A little bit of context, we've actually been here since Peter first purchased the home and have been a part of and in discussions with him on all of the plans from the beginning. He's been very transparent about what he's intended to do. I would echo the comments made by Mr. Huff that Peter's been very thoughtful about his communications with all of us. And I think based on what I have seen and heard, he's been very responsive to the changes that were requested. So from our perspective, and again, having a unique view of the property, we are, as I said, supportive of what he's doing and would ask the council to grant the permits and the variance as requested. Thank you.
Thank you. Next will be Vasu Cherlopale, Kyra Cherlopale, and then Enya Cherlopale. And you can correct my pronunciation when you begin.
Yeah. So is it possible for me to present, Mr. Mayor?
I'm not sure if we have the ability to do that. Let's go ahead and Ms. Radcliffe, do we have the ability to bring him up as with the presentation?
Yes, we're working on that right now.
Okay, and we'll reset the time in a moment when we get started on that.
Sorry about that.
Whenever you're ready.
Yes,
yeah, go ahead and begin. Your presentation is up.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and the council member for giving me this opportunity to present my agony. What you see here is my backyard. This picture is taken from the ground level of applicant's property and is taken by the applicant. The slope is steep and unfortunately we cannot comprehend the magnitude from this picture. Imagine this view from another 30 feet high from this point. The slope and angle would be much higher and we'll have broader view of our backyard. This is stealing our family privacy, our kids' freedom and peaceful enjoyment of our backyard. I have 3 concerns regarding this project. the proposed plan conveniently using hillside rules wherever it is advantageous and treating the lot as a flat lot whenever it is not convenient. This to me seems to like playing with the rules for one's convenience. It cannot be an a la carte menu. During a site and architecture meeting, it was repeated that Mr. Gall cannot conform to guidelines of adapting step-down structure on a hillside property because the building already has 2 levels and they do not want another level. Let me repeat, they do not want another level. If Mr. Gall can violate the rules to have what he wants, then what is the purpose of having guidelines or rules? It is not fair for the city to give away rights and properties because somebody demanded for it. To that point, the whole situation looks like the applicant demands $1,000 for no reason from us and then settles for $800. Should we consider this as a compromise or a strategy to extract? I respectfully request you to look at this issue from family of 4 and a dog living in much smaller house than current applicant's house. And our kitchen is about the same size as the applicant's current kitchen. Applicant's justification of variance is totally irrelevant as we are not enjoying any additional privileges. Mr. Gall claims to have remedy for privacy issue, but it will not solve the problem. The trees he planted can only grow up to 8 to 9 feet, 10 feet, their current height, and grows wider by 6 to 8 feet. This is from the tag from the tree he planted. This may protect his privacy, but definitely not ours to have. I cannot emphasize more on this, that the whole process is one-sided and is misleading information, using historic as a diplomatic immunity to get whatever is possible. The city residents paid almost $150K pre-tax money to in the last 4 years on only one condition, that Mr. Gall would adhere to interior standards. Now Mr. Gall is requesting City Council for variance to overcome the mandate set by the historic interior standards. For me, this looks like nothing but taking the maximum advantage of all the resources available in Monte Sereno. I respect your decision. I hope you do the right thing here. You, the council members, bear the burden of spending residents' money for the right reasons. Thank you for the effort and time you put in. And I respectfully request the city council to not grant the variance. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Kyra. We will get you set up and recognized.
Oh, hello.
Yes.
Oh, hi. Okay, so my name's Kyra.
Thank you.
And client service professionals like architects, lawyers, and consultants tend to carry biased opinions about their clients. They take their clients' interests very seriously and have to support them. That is the business model. In order to rule out any unbiased opinions about whether the historical home modification being proposed is right or wrong, we request our honorable city council members to obtain State Historical Building Safety Board approval. Our neighboring towns even have their own dedicated historic/heritage preservation committee, which Monte Sereno is missing. Our city planner and site and architecture commissioners, as per their professional backgrounds, do not have any historical preservation knowledge. And it's good to know that to take an unbiased committee's input to ensure that we make the right decision for our town and their residents. The proposed project overlooking our backyard is very unsettling, very uncomfortable, and intrusive to me and my sister's social life when we want to play with our friends or even cousins sometimes. I kindly request our city council members to make the right decision to safeguard our privacy, emotional well-being, and reject the proposed plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up will be Enya, and followed by Edic. EDIC will be after her.
Hi. Can I share my screen? Is that possible?
Yes, we'll get you set up for that. Just a moment.
Okay, you're all set.
All right. No, you didn't share screen. Yes. This is happening.
Okay, we see your screen and you may begin.
Hello,
Hello, my name is Enya Trilopoli. I'm a resident of 18290 Daves Avenue. I'm a junior at Los Gatos High School, and I want to share some additional information on behalf of my family. Mr. Gull has made some modifications to the plan. He said that he has removed a patio and an arbor on the south end, and this is the arbor he's referring to. This did not have any walls as such and had just beams. One of the options proposed was to have the new kitchen and master bedroom on the north side of the adobe home. As per Mr. Gull's architect, that side was not preferred as they don't want to cover the view of the building from the main side road. But the adobe home is not visible anywhere from the main Daves Avenue road. And as Mr. Gull wrote in his letter, it is visible from the access road standing in front of the adobe home, and you can see it from our home as well. Which means that the addition on the north side is for sure a very viable option, as that spot does not impact any neighbors. A rooftop balcony at the second floor has already been removed, but the picture we took today shows it still exists. The point is that staff report is not accurate. While shielding the existing adobe home is a challenge that we have accepted, asking us to bear additional structure within the setback seems irrational. While it is most likely impossible to completely shield the new addition, an option might be to place an addition within the legal setback spaces as per code 4.1 and 6 will definitely help. Decision based on this argument might not hold water. If that is the case, setback rules is of no use in this town. Like Monte Sereno, everyone can see their neighbor's home to some extent. This does not mean setback rules should not be adhered to. Setback space helps buildings not to stack up. Topography and steepness with the 23% slope existing location of the buildings are considered as special circumstances. Many parcels and homes from Monte Sereno fall under these circumstances. Can variances be provided to all these homes? The proposed plan overlooking our backyard is very unsettling, uncomfortable, and intrusive to my sister and I's social lives. I was discussing this plan with my friends recently to hear what they think, and that they have also stated that they would be uncomfortable having a towering structure overlooking the pool, not knowing if someone was there or not. I kindly request our council members to make the right decision to safeguard our privacy and emotional well-being and reject the proposed plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we will recognize Edith, and if anyone else wishes to speak, please raise your hand. We'll get you in order.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes, you may begin speaking. Go ahead.
All right, if you guys can hear me, I'm sorry. I had to get on with my iPhone as we lost power. Let me see. Jeez, I get an echo. I don't know. All right, let's try that.
That's better. Go ahead.
Okay, I can't hear you, but it looks like you can hear me. This is Eric Sliva. I'm a neighbor with Peter and Patrick. We're next door to Miller's and across the private driveway. We have looked at the drawings and we have looked at the plans, and I've seen Peter go through the changes that he's been asked to do, and we completely approved the project. I've known Peter since he first moved in, and I've had maybe a few bottles of wine that we've shared, but I don't know him to be a pervert. So I don't know this issue of looking at our grandkids or looking at our teenage daughters. Maybe they're delaying the project so the teenage daughter gets older and gets married and have grandkids, and then they can complain about the grandkids. But this is ridiculous. I've been in this neighborhood for over 20 years, and I can't believe we're even discussing this. My wife here would like to say a few words. Lisa.
Hi.
All right.
My name's Lisa Tolner-Sliva. I think we're all neighbors in Monte Sereno. We see everyone's home. No one has complete and utter privacy. But there's a common decency and respect that we all share and communicate with each other as neighbors. And I think Peter's project should be approved. I don't think he's doing anything that's that far reaching. Sure, a little compromises need to be made for a historical project. But other than that, I think all of the neighbors should learn to get along and be supportive of each other in their projects. And if the neighboring family is that obsessed with privacy, maybe they should buy a couple acres in the Santa Cruz Mountains where they don't see any other homes, so they can have complete and utter privacy. That might be a better solution, but Monte Sereno, you see other homes. That's just the nature of it. Thank you.
Thank you. We have an additional hand up for Andrea Anderson. We'll get you queued up and you can begin speaking when you're ready.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for the time. I actually know both Peter and Rupert's family, and I like them both, and I think they're all great people. And I've been watching this, and what I do find regretful is that they don't feel they can be safe, that the laws of our community will necessarily be applied. So as a resident of Monte Sereno, I want to know that the laws that are in place will protect me and give me rights. That's written down and set, and I wonder why we need to discuss some of these aspects. So I understand both sides and what they want to do, but I think the foundation for the council needs to be what the rights of all Monte Sereno residents are, and respect that and apply it, and also make sure that all residents can feel safe, and also that our money in Monte Sereno will not get spent on legal battles and suing. It should be pretty straightforward, in my opinion, and I hope that you find the right way, that it's just correct for all involved sides. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wishing to speak at this time, please raise your hand. Otherwise, we will return to Mr. Gall for a rebuttal for up to 5 minutes to address the issues that have been raised, if he wishes. Mr. Gall, you are recognized if you wish, and you may begin when you're ready.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, great, thank you. First, I'd just like to start with the fact that I followed after the last city council meeting last year. I met, as I mentioned, with city staff, with my neighbors, and with the council members individually. I do believe that I addressed all of the concerns that were raised and followed all the guidance that was provided to me. And I feel like I exceeded those expectations. And as a result, I come to you today with full staff, the city attorney, the city planner, the city manager, approval and consent, and unanimous approval recommendation from the Site and Architecture Committee. I believe that the city staff did an exceptional job at crafting the staff report. It was very detailed in nature. There are no code violations. I think, I'm sure that Jean will address the setback requirement, which is incorrect, that as stated by Ms. Shekhar. And I'm not sure I understand where the tax information comes from Vasu, but that's also factually incorrect. And I'll let Craig address this Secretary of Standards guidelines, and I believe he addressed that up front. The property also, the addition is not on the property line. I do, at its closest point, go only 19 inches into the setback on the first floor and only 32 inches on the second floor. So it's a very minimal encroachment into the setback. And I do believe, as Craig mentioned earlier, that the approval of what I'm trying to accomplish with my home will improve the property values for Rupa Shekhar and Vasu and her family, as well as my other neighboring properties. And I'd like to offer Craig a portion of the time to speak, please. And
All right.
open any questions that the council might have to me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, can everyone hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, good. I just wanted to address a couple of things. It's probably not clear to everyone from this discussion tonight, but we actually pulled the addition back and put the bulk of it in with the bulk of the existing building. So not only do we move it away from the property line, but we pulled it back up the hill some so that it does not project that much, only a couple feet from the back wall of the existing house. And further, it is only 2 inches higher than the existing ridgeline on the two-story part. We are also shaping the ground down at the bottom to reduce the apparent height, and it is incorrect that it is more than 29.3. If you follow through, starting with the site plan, and you work your way through, you'll see that our 29.3 calculation is correct, that we're required to measure it from a particular point on the existing ground, and that's what we've done. Also, I spoke with the head architect from the California Office of Historic Preservation, and he told me that for houses, in regard to standards 9 and 10 of the Secretary's standards, for houses, we should err on the side of being compatible. And for commercial buildings, we should worry more about differentiation. So we took that to heart. And that's what we did with our materials, the shape of the building addition, the types and shapes of windows and so on. We made them very compatible with the existing structure. But most of all, we put it on the back corner. I think there was some misunderstanding about not being seen from Dave's. That's not what we meant. We put it on the back corner so that it would not interrupt the most important facade, which is the front of the building. That has to stay. So we've done our utmost, I think.
All right, thank you. Moving on now to council member questions and comments. Do we have any council members wishing to speak? Mayor Pro Tem Elahi. You're on mute.
Yeah, there seems to be a factual dispute going on as to how far the setback is encroaching and how far it should be encroaching. So if Ms. Hamilton can answer that question, I hope you understand the question I'm asking, because Ms. Shekhar said it was going like 15 or 25 feet, 15 feet on the first floor and about 25 or 30 feet on the second floor. But Mr. Gall's position is that it's only a few inches on the first floor and a couple of extra inches on the second floor. Could you clarify that as to what the actual setback is and or the variance in the setback, how far is it?
Yes. So Ms. Shekhar's interpretation of the city's zoning regulations is incorrect. The use of the slope density formula subjects the property, which is zoned R144, to the R120 setback standards, which at the first floor is 15 and at the second floor is 20. This is the way that the staff has interpreted the use of the slope density formula has been consistent throughout the years. And, you know, when I came on back in 2016, I did have the benefit of the original city planner, Mr. Leventhal, and I ensured that I understood completely the use of the slope density formula and how we apply it and when we apply it and whatnot. So no disrespect intended to Ms. Shakar. However, her interpretation is incorrect, and the consistent application by the city of these would have the side setback of the R120 without any increase because of the minimum lot size differentiation.
So how far is the variance sought then exactly?
Well, if you look at the plan set, and probably page A 5.0 shows what the where the 15-foot first floor setback is and how much the proposed addition encroaches. So at the corner closest to the downslope neighbor, the proposed first floor addition encroaches approximately 19 inches into the setback. And at the corner furthest from the downslope area, it encroaches approximately 4 feet. And that's primarily to keep a straight wall. So you see that on page A 5.0. On page A 6.0 is where you see the 20-foot setback line for the second floor addition. And you can see that it at the corner closest to the downslope neighbor, it is 2 feet 10 inches. And again, the area furthest away is another 2 feet beyond what already encroaches into the setback. So that's on page A 6.0.
Thank you.
Ms. Turner, you are recognized. You'll need to unmute yourself.
Yes, I have really looked at this slope density calculation, and it looks like the city has used this 15 feet and 20 feet in setbacks. However, I went to the actual slope density calculation myself, and what I get is 20 feet for the first story and 25 feet for the second story. And this is all explained in section C of the code, that is 10.05.030. So I have to disagree with the city's calculation of 15 feet and 20 feet. I think it should be 20 feet and 25 feet. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments at this time? Ms. Lawler.
Are we opening it? Are we now just having council discussion? I mean, or you
Yes,
just asking?
that's right. And I should mention public comment has been formally closed. We are now into full council member discussion to be followed by voting after discussion.
Okay, great. Then I just want to say, first of all, that I truly appreciate the applicants listening to council last time and coming back with significant changes to his plans to address the concerns that we brought up. I also appreciate the amount of blood, sweat, and tears he's put into preserving a historic treasure in our neighborhood. And I feel like because of the difficulties of building in addition to a historic property, that I think he has done absolutely everything he could possibly do. And I think we should go ahead and approve his project. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? Ms. Turner, yes.
Yes, if you don't mind, I have some questions to ask.
Sure, of course.
You said that the windows facing Ms. Shakar's property will be obscured. What I'd like to understand is how are you going to obscure the windows? Is this by putting curtains over the window, or will the glass be translucent? Can you specify that, please?
I believe Ms. Hamilton probably has the answer to that. Otherwise, we can bring Mr. Gall back to respond.
The glass will be some sort of either patterned frosted glass, which again is typically used on bathroom windows, other windows. There's one note on it, but if it so pleases the council, we can make it specific to as a condition that all south-facing windows utilize obscured glass.
Yes, I'd like to make that any conditions of approval, if possible, please. I have another question. Mayor Luthold, may I ask?
Yes, go ahead. You've got the floor.
Okay. You said that you have trees that are screening the property. What is the height of the trees today, and what is the dimension of the, and how high do you expect those trees to be? Remember, his property is 30 feet above Ms. Shakar's property. So are those trees today?
Yeah, so we'll need to call Mr. Gall back to speak to the issues of current and eventual height in his understanding.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
My understanding, I looked up the Carolina laurels that I placed along the property line, and my experience and from talking to my landscape architect and from going on the internet in my research is that they grow from 20 to 30 feet. The site architect requested me to, as part of the approval process, install two 48-inch box native trees. So I'm looking at two 48-inch box coastal oaks. And at a 48-inch box, my understanding is that they would come approximately 15 feet in height, and then they could grow, quite large after that point. Is that satisfactory?
So right now, the trees cover provides protection for you and not necessarily for Ms. Shakar, is that right?
The screening plants that I put in, I believe, provide screening and privacy for both sides. The Carolina laurels that I put in, I put about 35 of them in, are I purchased them at about 6, 7 feet in height, and I spaced them about 4 foot from each other. There is some visibility because they're not mature at this point in between the shrubs, but that will close in. I would assume in relatively short order. So that'll provide additional screening again for both sides. There's a very large pine tree that is on the side of my house, kind of on the corner. You probably recall it, that faces the downslope neighbor in the pool area. I think it's 50 feet high. So that's what's there existing. I think there's a large tree that's, for me, it appears like a ficus in nature. And that, I believe, is about 15 feet high. And that's also situated in that same sort of corner pocket, which would have potentially downslope visibility if there were any.
Okay. I've looked online at these trees, and the maximum height for these trees is 10 feet. I just wanted you to know that. So I have another question, please. I wanted to address the height of the structure that is in the drawing. If you look at the drawing, it actually says it is labeled 29 feet, all right? However, if you really add up the dimensions, that actually gives you 32 feet. So the standard is 21 feet and the maximum permissible is 30 feet. So can you tell me what the actual height is if you were to look at the drawings and add them all up?
Could I ask my architect to answer that question?
Yes.
Craig?
Now can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I was anticipating this question because there's a lot of misunderstanding about this. So let's start with the site plan A2. And if you look in the area of the addition, you'll see a whole series of wavy lines all across this drawing with numbers on them. And those are called topo lines or topographic lines. They show the horizontal elevation, a vertical elevation, but a horizontal line, all along that area of the property at 486 feet, just off the corner of the addition. There's one that says 486 feet. Then closer into the addition is a spot elevation that says 486.1 feet. So keep your eye on that 486.1. Now go over to the elevation drawings, A7 and A8. A7 on the bottom, the left side elevation, that's the same elevation that shows up in the neighbor's presentation. And you'll notice that that 486.1 feet elevation as existing also is marked on there next to a dotted line. So we are required to measure off of the existing soil height, and that's why we did it at the corner of the house, 486 feet, 0.1. And then that's how we got the 29.3, because if you follow that line over to the left and then up, you end up back at the ridge line at 29 feet, 3 inches, plus minus. That's repeated on A8 on the rear elevation. You'll see that same point, and it's not the floor height down in the basement. It's not the 8-foot dimension. It's higher than that because we're taking it from the existing soil that you see out there now. So that's how we got to the 29.3. Does that make sense?
I'll have to look at it again. Let's move on.
Okay.
I wanted to ask a question about this privacy wall separating the two properties. Could you please describe that? How long, how high, and where it's located? And how much of it does it actually screen your property from Mr. Carr's property?
Craig, could you respond? Could I ask my architect to respond to those?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Am I still on?
Yes.
Okay.
We can hear you.
Again, if you look at A8, the elevation drawings, the rear elevation, if you look at the deck, you'll see a solid wall below the deck where people are out on the ground. There'd be no windows there. And then up on the deck level, in this picture, it would be to the right-hand side. It says new privacy wall. So that wraps around the corner of the deck, follows the line of the property line at an angle, goes all the way back to the house, and it is higher than a person. It's actually going to go all the way up to the roof. So there's no way you would have any view unless you went down into the yard and looked over. There's no way up on the deck that you would be able to see out that unless, I guess you could lean over the railing and look around the privacy wall, but essentially the wall protects anybody on the deck from seeing down into the neighbor's property.
So how tall is that privacy wall, please?
1 story, all the way up to the roof. I know it shows a little bit less. Right now it shows like 1.5 feet less, but we decided we're just going to go all the way up to the roof with it.
So that includes the first story?
Yes, it's the
So is
entire
that
height of the
10
first.
10
It's
feet tall?
it's the entire height of the first story.
So it's 10 feet.
Yes, all the way to the roof.
Okay.
It actually shows both an A8 and a A7.
Okay. So let me ask you one more question, please. So are you covering up the old adobe wall and the window?
Yes, we are. That is thoroughly allowed under the Secretary of the Interior Standards for Rehabilitation, because they encourage additions, and actually Preservation Brief 14, which was quoted by the neighbor, talks about additions to buildings. It's really hard to put on an addition and not have it touch the other building by its nature of being an addition. When it touches it, there's a priority level. The front of the building, we treat as if it's sacred. We don't touch it. In fact, you'll notice that you can't even tell that the windows have been replaced already in the previous work that Peter has done on the 2nd floor in that wood section of the building. They look exactly like they did before, right down to the dimensions. That's what we have to do. But on the back of the building, where the public does not see it, we have a little bit more free rein to make a building that is actually usable so that it doesn't end up as a museum that you can't live in. And what we are proposing to do is there's something incorrect. I have to apologize. On our drawings on sheet A5, the first floor plan, if you look over at the demo plan on the left of that drawing, you'll see that I'm still pointing to all the windows in the existing dining area and saying we're taking all those out. That's incorrect. I didn't get a chance to change that. Instead, look over at that same dining room on the proposed first floor plan to the right on that same drawing, and you'll see that we are only taking out the sash on the window on the left-hand side of that dining room. The other window stays just as it is. Now, when I say the sash, I mean only the movable part of the window. The jamb, the head, the frame, the opening, everything stays right there. So we could put that sash back in at any time because it's being salvaged and it'll be stuck in the basement. It'll always be there. But that's the only way you can get into the rest of this front portion of the house. The old kitchen has also a little window in it, a small one. We're not changing the opening at all. We're not making that a door or anything. We're just taking the sash and covering it with a stained glass, and we'll put a light behind it. Now, the fact that you can no longer see the adobe on the outside of this wall doesn't mean anything because it's the public that has to see it. When the public drives by or walks by on the private street, they will not see anything any different. They'll see every bit of the adobe that's there now, all the windows that are there now. They won't see any change. We've taken great pains to hide this in behind the existing building, and you won't be able to see it from Dave's Avenue either. Does that answer your questions?
I've got one more, and I want to go back to the setback, please. The setback, based on what I've read, is that it increases by 5 feet because the actual property area exceeds the slope density minimum by more than 10,000 feet. Is that correct?
On that, I would refer to Jean, Ms. Hamilton.
Councilmember Turner, anything further?
It hasn't answered my question.
I'm here to answer that question. So again, the city's interpretation up to and through my tenure has been to look to the slope, the minimum lot size per the slope density formula for the property as zoned, not the minimum.
No, but that's not what section 10.0503 section C says. And this is, I think this is critical because we're looking at a setback that is not consistent with what the code says. I mean, we got to go by the code, right?
And I think, not to get an argument on city's interpretation or consistent application over the years, but the request is for a variance. So again, I'm in a position to have taken direction as to the interpretation and application of these regulations, and have worked to apply them consistently with many properties that come in for development permits that are subject to the slope density formula. So I'm not prepared to alter that application of it, except upon direction by somebody else.
Okay, Jeannie, may I ask it again, please?
If I may sort of try to clarify what I think City Planner Hamilton is saying, she's referring, and I believe Councilmember Turner is also referring to the provision of the code that says each of the minimum front, side, and rear setbacks shall be increased by 5 feet for each 10,000 square feet by which the area of a parcel of property or lot exceeds the minimum lot area required in this residential zoning district, or per the slope density formula as set forth in the subdivision title of this code, should the lot qualify. And I think City Planner Hamilton is stating that in her practice and in the city's historical practice, that phrase, per the slope density formula as set forth in the subdivision title of this code, should the lot qualify, has been interpreted to mean the slope density as applied to the residential parcel as it is zoned. So in this case, it would be increased by 5 feet for each 10,000 square feet by which the parcel exceeds the minimum lot size for the R144 zoning after the slope density formula is calculated. Now, it should be recognized that this language, which I think has been in the city code for quite some time, is, a little bit ambiguous. And in general, the courts are going to, defer to the city's, interpretation of it and its historical practice. But, certainly, this does seem to cause a lot of confusion for the public. And, I have discussed with the planner as to whether this should be modified to line up more closely, have the text line up more closely with what the city has done for, over the ages with respect to interpreting this provision.
I will have to think. Let me give me a couple of minutes to think about that, because I that was a mouthful.
Sure, we can come back to you, Councilmember Turner, and let you hear that, and also hear maybe some other input around some other questions that council may bring forth, and then we can revisit them.
Let me just say this. And this is for Sergio, right? The code actually says this lot has to use the R120 specs, not the R144 specs. So therefore, right, we go back to the argument that I just made, that the actual property area exceeds the slope density minimum by more than 10,000 feet for an R120. I mean, let's be clear on this, because this is critical. And I just don't see it. I mean, if you look at the code, it says we're going to use the R120 spec and not the R144. Now you can't jump up and use the R144 spec, which is what you guys are doing. And that's not code.
Okay, I think we've heard the explanation of what the city is interpreting. We've heard both the opposition's concerns and Councilmember Turner's concerns on that. And this is something that can go into people's decisions as we decide how to go forward. So let's move ahead and look at any other council member questions. It looks like we do have the applicant and his architect available. If anybody has any further questions they want to direct at them, let's go ahead and do that now. I don't see any hands up. I did have a question and wanted to clarify on something that Ms. Turner had brought up and Ms. Hamilton addressed briefly, which was the issue of obscured glass. My understanding, according to the plans that we're looking at here, call for obscured glass on the first floor. That would be the kitchen and any windows that would have first floor visibility out onto the adjoining property. And this second floor, basically, that one is a bathroom that would have obscured glass, but that the master bedroom would bring in two windows. Those would not have obscured glass, one of them facing south and one of them facing west. Is that correct per the plans?
If anyone's waiting for me to answer that, the answer I have is yes.
Okay. I would just comment from my review of the site and looking very carefully at the story poles, going up on the roof and taking a look at this and considering the issues. I was concerned about the potential of the second floor, which used to have a balcony that looked down over the pool that was quite frankly horrible for privacy concerns, even though Juliet balconies probably are never used. But it really did take away privacy to put a balcony that essentially looked out and that was placed with no setback at that point. I looked at it very carefully, and it looks that the windows, the primary window that the bedroom would look out of is actually south facing across the back of the neighbor's lot, not towards the pool at all. From my view, there would not be any necessity to have an obscured glass on the second floor there. One possibility, given that that is a bedroom, would be to have a somewhat less tall window on the south facing side. I didn't look at the exact specs of the window, but assuming that it's 42 inches, perhaps make it 36 inches and a little bit higher up, that would take away, really, it would still leave the views of the scenery, and in fact, make sure that it wasn't looking out unless you leaned out it, you wouldn't be looking at all at the neighboring property. The west facing window is interesting because it's now set back further and really has no natural looking out over the neighbor's property, and most importantly, not looking down at the neighbor's pool. But that tree, that 50-foot pine tree, is really the key here. to protecting privacy and also to protecting the slope itself from having this very large looming house on it that is going to have to be very carefully engineered. I don't know where we stand on soils reports. I assume that will come later. But that tree is really the cornerstone to keeping the property below safe and to providing privacy. The existing construction that's proposed pushes extremely close to that tree. And I have concerns that if we do approve this, we should issue the very strictest level of tree protection conditions, similar or even in excess of what we did on the Greenwood property, to make certain that that tree survives. I had a question as to whether we could even require a bond to ensure not only that the city is compensated should that tree not make it, but that the neighbor is compensated, because again, that is everything to their privacy. And the building is constructed within extremely tight clearances for the porch and the basement. I also have concerns in terms of digging down on the basement there to put in a proper basement, that we're going to be affecting the roots on that tree. So I believe the basement is important to keep with the adobe style and also to create storage in a way that doesn't show up when you put it on the application for Monte Sereno, because for some reason we still don't count basements here. But that's a full height basement under the entire deck, which then pushes the outside wall of the deck out towards the neighbor's property, creating an 8 or more foot wall underneath the deck. And if you look on the elevations, it really discounts that in the elevations, that needs to be considered, that that's an 8-foot wall reaching up to the deck to create the full height basement underneath. And then it's going to be seen from that angle 30 feet lower at the swimming pool. So it's a definite concern about mass. I don't know if anyone has investigated whether the deck could be more of a traditional floating deck. The basement could be pushed back rather than being the full 18 feet from the residence and on the edge of the deck, but maybe back 6 or 8 feet under the deck, so that the deck may project roughly that amount, although it's probably not necessary to have an 18-foot deck. That's an extremely large deck. But I think those are some considerations about bulk we might want to consider addressing, and tree protection that we might want to address. But I also wanted to add those comments that I did not see concerns in terms of the bedroom windows being privacy issues, only the first floor windows. So I'll have some other comments, I imagine, but let's go to other council members with any questions.
Could I address one comment?
Yes, sure.
About the 8-foot height, sorry, the 8-foot height of the wall under the deck. It is 8 foot high to the concrete slab down below it, but we're going to throw dirt in there. So we will raise the outside level so it won't be so formidable. It will not be an 8-foot height. I think you can see that in A7. No, A8, the elevation view on the back of the building. You see where that soil line curves up from where the steps are on the left in the middle of the building. It curves up along that deck at the back so that it isn't a full 8 feet. The dotted line for the 8 foot is way down below that. That's not to say that we can't pull that back. We certainly could.
I guess my concern about that is in looking at the property, basically that deck pushes right to where the drop off is extremely steep. There's nothing to support the dirt that you're showing piled up there.
Sure, I
because
understand.
that wall
right.
is literally on the cliff where it drops off suddenly about 6 feet. If it was pushed back, and even if the deck extended the same, then you could have some room to throw some dirt in.
I understand completely, and I don't see why we can't do that.
Okay. And do you have any comments about the tree roots and tree protection, how the basement would end up needing to be modified if you're carefully excavating and run into important roots for that very important tree?
Well, what my arborist friends tell me is that, I have some over 100-foot tall trees on my property, and we have trenched. In one case, we trenched on both sides of the tree to put in shallow foundations and utilities. And my arborist friends tell me that you can go down at least 3 feet into the soil, and you are cutting the topmost roots, the horizontal roots, but you're not disturbing the all-important deep roots on most varieties of trees. Now, that's not true for every variety. And so that's certainly something worth looking into. I agree completely. We should protect that big old tree. And if that means pulling the foundation level back, that's fine. The foundations, again, on A8, if you look at the wavy lines we've put in there, we've tried to show how the existing soil goes downhill in this area. It's a little hard to show on a flat elevation, but the point is that by the time you get over to the tree roots, it'll be down a little bit lower. It won't be as low as our dotted line for the concrete slab of the lower level, but it will be down lower certainly than the deck. So actual foundations for a slab are only about 12 inches deep. So I would hope that they would be in that shallow area of roots that it's okay, they will regenerate, they'll find their way, and they get back, according to my arborist friends. But I agree completely that it's worth looking into and saving that tree.
All right, thank you. Other council member questions before we turn to a full-on discussion and amongst the council?
Mayor Luthel, this is Jeannie Hamilton, the planner. I can
Yes.
respond to Councilmember Turner's concerns with some additional information.
Yes, please.
Yeah, we talked about it, but didn't go into depth. But there was a variance approved for that second-story addition back in 1961. The plans that were approved establish a 20-foot side setback at the time. So that's also consistent with how the city has been administering, the setbacks for this property. But the plan specific for that 1961 variance establish a 20-foot side setback for that second-story addition. And I believe it's a 11-foot front setback.
I'd like to follow up on that, Ms. Hamilton, and make sure that I can repeat back what I think I've been hearing between the conversation here. So, and actually, you said there was mention of a 20-foot side setback when the prior variance was approved, but I thought you were saying that we're treating this as a 15-foot side setback when we're interpreting the variance request this time around. Since you're applying the R120 first floor setbacks, that would be 15 feet. Is that right?
This was specific for the second story addition.
Oh, you're saying the second story addition mentioned
So
20.
Yeah,
so
the
it was
variance,
15 with another 5 for the second story.
the variance at the time was specific for the second story addition, and it established the 20-foot second story setback side and the 11-foot front.
Okay. So let me see if I can repeat back what I think I've heard described here about how we're applying these rules and slope density and all of that. This is an R144 zoned lot, and I didn't look at the numbers, but not significantly in excess of the 44,000 feet. And we are in agreement that it is a sloped lot. Therefore, we're going to apply in our consistent interpretation that we're going to step this down to an R120 set of setbacks because it's an R144 with a slope as a starting place. Is that right? Ms. Hamilton?
Because of the slope of 23.9% coupled with the actual size of the lot, the slope density formula drops this property down to be subject to the R120 district standards.
Okay. If this lot was, and we're not then going backwards from that and saying it's an R120 in excess, we're saying it's a 144 not in excess of the 144. If it was, let's say, 60,000 acres, 60,000 feet, we would have to apply greater setbacks, but our starting place would be an R120 15-foot setback, and then we would apply the slope density to increase that. Is that how those work?
Well, the way the city has been interpreting these regulations over the years and applying them, we would not apply additional setbacks until it exceeded the lot size as required per the slope of the R144.
Okay. And then now that we've said that it's a sloped lot and we're going to apply the R120 standards, do we have standards to apply also in terms of this is a sloped lot, therefore it shouldn't exceed essentially single story, 15 feet heights, as we've discussed related to other projects in the city? Wouldn't an R120 on a slope require those lower elevations, essentially precluding a second story? Or am I missing something?
No, we don't have any zoning regulations which limit the height on a lot regardless of slope. The only time that came into play more recently was with respect to the subdivision along the scenic corridor. There's no other similar regulation within these individual zoning districts.
Okay, so we would be applying just the regular height restrictions, which would be the typical two-story height restrictions.
Correct, and none of the height standards are impacted by the slope.
Okay. We do have the idea of the step down being appropriate in the sloped houses, correct?
That is a guideline. And again, it's a guideline that in some instances may be practical, may not be practical. And I think in this case, given the existing house situation and layout, it's not as practical as one would think. Also, sometimes when you step down a hill, it doesn't necessarily reduce the visual mass because you then really get the visual look of a 3 to 4 to 5 because you can't see the step backs. You just see the single tall structure in front of you. So in staff's opinion, this is not a situation where it's appropriate. Although the applicant did go ahead and lower the additions, so they are stepping down into the new spaces, which, as you know, in current trends is not that desirable. However, he has gone ahead and done it to address some of the vertical mass issues presented in his first proposal.
All right, thank you. Any other council members wishing to address any more questions? Otherwise, we will close that. Ms. Turner, you have your hand ups.
Yes, I wanted to go back to Ms. Hamilton's talk about the variance that was granted in 1961 of the side setback. I just want to point out that it's still not consistent with the code that we have today. So we're going to grant a variance. We're going to consider granting a variance with that is not consistent with what the city code is today. The R120, the second story can be 21 feet unless the second story is set back further. So depending on the increased setback, the height may go up to 30 feet.
Are you asking me a question or just making the statement?
Just making a statement.
Okay.
It appears to me that the code is clear, though, that an R120 specs apply because of the size of the lot. The setbacks are increased. And it's inconsistent with, to apply one R144 on that same spec. And that's what we're doing. We're applying 144 to an R120 spec, and and this is just, I don't think this is right. Thank you.
All right, let's go ahead. If there are no further questions directed at the applicant or Ms. Hamilton, let's close that section completely, and let's move fully to council discussion and suggestions for any changes, if there's agreement on that, and decision making. Would anyone like to speak? Ms. Lawler.
I'll defer if other council members want to speak at this time. I don't know if Councilmember Mekachek has had an opportunity.
All right, now you got him to raise his hand.
Yeah.
Councilmember Mekachek.
Okay, so as a new council member hearing this for the first time, I'm looking at this and I'm saying, okay, we're dealing with a very difficult property here. It's got a historic building on it. I believe that we need to have more historic buildings and protect them in Monte Sereno. We have very few. So I understand all the constraints around this. The applicant came and presented, requested the permit and the variance, etc., and it was denied. So the applicant went back and heard the comments from council and the neighbors and revised the plans. Spent a lot of time revising the plans. So what was it it was several months, more than 6 months. And then went to site architecture. Site and architecture reviewed the plans, and it was the second time. So the first time it went to site and architecture, they recommended the first floor variance, but not the second floor. So now they hear it for a second time, and they made one change to the plans, or put one condition on the two 48-inch boxes, and then they approved it. The same plans are coming now to council, and with those changes that were made, site and architecture has recommended this. So to me, I think that I have to support this just by looking at the situation. The issue that was raised in terms of the slope density and moving it from R144 to R120, I believe that the logic behind that is that if you're on a steep slope, over a threshold, then you don't have the flexibility to locate a dwelling in the same envelope. So the R120 takes effect, and it gives you the ability to move a building subject to the setback envelope to take advantage of the property. And I think that that's what's being done in this case. So as I look at this, I think, you know, the first application was denied. Changes were requested. Those changes went through. Site and architecture reviewed it, approved it, and I would support this application.
Thank you. Councilmember Elahi, you've been quiet.
I think you've expressed the concerns that should be addressed, which is make sure that there's enough privacy on the Shaker's side. That's being addressed by the windows being opaque or as close to that as possible, by the tall trees that are going to be put on the lots, by making sure that the pine tree does not get affected by the construction. I think we can put some of those conditions in. And it's a nice building. It's a nice project. The adobe is very nicely kept. And I have to accept the planning commission's staff's view on how much the setbacks are. So if you're only talking about a few inches of variances, given the adobe house requirements that are out there, I think this is an appropriate case where a variance can be approved, because it's not like a normal house which doesn't have any specific circumstances, and we don't approve variances easily. But you've got here something that is unique, and a lot of steps are being taken to preserve the privacy of the neighborhood. And so looking at that and those considerations, I think those are meritorious changes that have been made.
Thank you. Councilmember Lawler.
Yes, I agree. This is a unique property. It has incredible challenges, and I believe that the applicant and his architect have embraced a very difficult project and have been able to thread the proverbial needle, I think, and provide living space while preserving a historical property and doing everything they can to preserve the neighbors' privacy. I have no problem with the master bedroom windows. He's obscured the downstairs windows, and the upstairs windows are smaller. I do agree with the stipulation that we do everything we can to protect that, particularly that one large tree. And the architect also mentioned that they could certainly push back the wall underneath the deck if that is so desired. So I suppose we would have to make a motion on each one of these things separately, the variance and the site development permit and the special permit, or could we do it all at once? Because I would, procedural question for you, Mayor.
Yes, I think what I'm hearing, and I don't want to put words in Councilmember Mekachek's mouth, but we have Councilmember Elahi and yourself, it seems, in agreement with my two suggestions. Let me try to put those two suggestions into words in one motion to amend here regarding the conditions, and see if that's acceptable to at least a majority. I may need the city attorney to help in terms of any adjustment to these, but let me put out here what my thoughts are on this. And that is that we would, if we're voting to approve, the amendment would be to require the applicant to use all available tree protection measures to ensure that the 50-foot pine is preserved and protected during construction and thereafter. One condition related to that would be to move the basement wall back 6 feet from the edge of the deck as drawn, and to add to the conditions that in the event that during the excavation, it is determined that the tree is being impacted, that further changes to the basement location or height be made during the construction process and excavation process. City Attorney, those seem like additional conditions that make sense.
Yes, as the council is likely aware, there is a draft resolution in the agenda packet for the council to consider, which makes the findings that are required to approve The use permit, the special use permit, and the variance. Certainly the council can by motion, adopt the resolution with the standard conditions of approval that are included with it and add the additional conditions of approval suggested by the mayor. And with respect to the tree protection measures, usually it's, the city has required tree protection plans as developed by an arborist with respect to figuring out the appropriate, distance which it's safe to excavate in depth with respect to the tree. It's likely a good idea to require the, that a certified arborist have a tree protection plan that is submitted and verified by city staff.
Yeah, and I think we would also want, I see your hand, Ms. Turner, we'll come to you in a second. I think we would also want to see that during excavation, that there are checkpoints. I think the excavation would need to be hand excavation and that there would need to be checkpoints added in there to the conditions. Before I go to Ms. Turner, I actually wanted to make some comments here because it sounds like we have a plurality of the city council that is prepared to move forward and approve at least a slightly modified and conditioned plan. As we move that direction, I want to point out a few things, and that is, first of all, I was very much opposed to the original design when it was presented. I visited the sites, and the house was massive and looming, and really immediately when you saw the story poles, no one could have possibly thought that was a good idea. The changes, the applicant did listen to the changes and did that were requested, and it seems has really done everything to try to accomplish the things that would need to be accomplished. Stepping back the second story, losing a lot of what the applicant would have thought to be ideal room in the master bedroom there is important. It lines up with the existing addition, essentially, with about 2 inches of change at the roof line, and I believe in the connection there, a few inches in the connection to make the landings the right size. But in general, it looks a lot better, and it does create a little bit of the step back that is desired for the second story being back from the first story. It also it took away the deck on the second story and set that back above the roof over the protected area of the covered deck. So that also creates a natural looking setback. Now, when you observe this from the neighbor's pool, you really see that the ridge line has been brought down. The second story extremity there at the gutter line does not take away a lot of light and doesn't loom in the same way. So it's still a large house. It still is certainly impacting the neighbor in some very serious ways. And I'm very aware of their concerns and also concerned about that, which is why that tree is so important, why the obscured windows are important. All of this comes together to kind of balance the equities. Ultimately, when I'm looking at this, I'm looking at the variance request being from 19 inches to 4 feet to make this work. And I understand we can talk about the what we think the setback should be, but it doesn't really matter because the house is already there. And the existing intrusions were even worse before, although they weren't as heavy. But really what we've got to look at is a plan that works for the lot, works for the house, and it really does fit with this variance request about making it so that this house can be preserved and yet useful. So I think the variance that's being requested is reasonable in light of all of those things. So I am ready to move towards trying to find ways to condition this to make sure that we accomplish these last few things that can be accomplished. Oh, and one other concern I do have is the size of those Carolina, whatever they're called, cypresses or such. It does appear that the tag on the trees says they're going to grow to be 10 feet tall. The applicant thought they were going to grow to be taller than that. Some of them are quite shaded by the pine tree and are going to struggle to grow at all, which is fine because the pine tree is there. So I think this is a potential concern. Any way that those can be maintained to create the maximum amount of height, or the neighbor can be worked with potentially to help them with their landscaping so that they can get privacy around their pool and maintain that, I think would be good. The privacy wall, I also looked at that carefully. And the privacy wall, initially I was skeptical. And when I looked very carefully at the sight lines, it does appear to provide very good privacy to the pool. And again, if I were the downhill neighbor, that is absolutely the primary concern. Looks like it's been addressed pretty well. So those are my comments. Let's go back to Councilmember Turner. I know you've got your hand up.
Yes, I just wanted to let you know that my concern about the windows and walls are no longer concerns. There is one thing I would like to add to the conditions though, and that has to do with the existing 11 by 11 second story deck that will be needed to be removed. So I wanted to make sure that that happens.
Yeah, that's going to be replaced by the master bedroom. That deck all goes away, is my understanding, and becomes the new master bedroom, which has no deck now.
Okay. Is that right?
Yes, we've got Liz nodding along.
Yes, the new construction will get rid of those existing tack-on additions as well as that deck above that existing old bathroom addition. So that will be removed by default.
Okay.
All right, so I guess I will put forward, since I laid them out, the motion to to amend the resolution as proposed, to add the tree protection measures, also to push back the basement wall 6 feet from the edge of the deck, and to indicate in the conditions that should the excavation reveal issues with the roots when during excavation, that the basement may require to be further set back or stepped in some way, that the certified arborist present a tree protection plan specifically for that pine tree, and that inspections be required during excavation to ensure that the tree protection is being followed, and that we're not finding roots that are problematic, which would then be leading to us changing the requirements for the basement. Councilmember Mekachuk.
Yes, I would like to, first of all, I like your resolution. The only thing I'm wondering about is, subject to an engineering review, can you move back the foundation 6 full feet of that deck? And maybe the words best efforts up to 6 feet, or words to that effect, are subject to engineering review. It should be to the extent possible, but I don't know if it could work for 6 feet.
I guess I don't have any problem with that change because it's still, obviously the plans are going to need to be modified to confirm that it would work. So subject to engineering review, seek to move that wall back a full 6 feet or whatever is reasonably allowable. We can allow staff to have some discretion about that if it turns out that it's 5 feet or 4 feet, but the goal should be 6 feet if at all possible, just to really clean up the sight lines from down below and take away that bulk, and also to allow the coverage by the addition of the dirt, which is just not feasible with the full 18-foot basement.
I'll second your motion.
All right, let's vote on the amendment first, since it looks like that will clear, and then let's go to the full as modified resolution.
Okay, Councilmember Mekachek,
Aye.
Councilmember Turner,
Yes.
Councilmember Lawler,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Elahi,
Yes.
and Mayor Luthold.
Yes.
That motion passes 5-0.
Okay, now do we have a motion to pass the modified resolution inclusive of the modified conditions?
So moved.
Councilmember
Sorry.
Lawler has made that motion. Second.
I'll second.
Councilmember Mekachek seconds.
Okay, Councilmember Mekachek,
Aye.
Councilmember Turner,
No.
Councilmember Lawler,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Elahi,
Yes.
and Mayor Luthold.
Yes.
And that motion passes 4-1. Yes, 4-1.
All right, thank you. Moving to the next item, would everyone like to take a 5-minute break before we move on? Yes, so let's take a 5-minute break and then we will come back on item number 10. Okay, looks like we're nearly all back. I think Councilmember Turner might be within earshot. So let's see if coming back will get her online. Okay, it looks like we've got everyone back. So let's resume with item number 10. Discussion related to the citywide fence regulations and proposed amendments. This is a directional only discussion at this time. And Mr. Mekachek, are you going to participate as a council member in this or only as a member of the public?
This is a direction only, so I'll participate as a council member. I don't think we're going to make a, we're not going to change an ordinance tonight. Importantly, since I was involved with this, there was a citywide survey, and the results of that survey showed that most of our residents advocate changing the fence ordinance. So I'm not stepping out of bounds in that regard, in my opinion. And if we take a roll call vote tonight on anything, then I would abstain.
Okay, thank you. All right, so first let's begin with public comment. Do we have any members of the public wishing to address this issue related to the fence ordinance? If so, please raise your hand so we can recognize you. Seeing none, let's go ahead and move to discussion. I think, I don't know if staff wants to make any presentation on this or if we should just go directly into discussion. Mr. Leonardis, did you want to make any presentation?
Thank you, Mayor Leuthold. I would defer to Ms. Hamilton if she had any prepared comments on this evening. Otherwise, I think we could go straight into discussion. I will say I did provide to the council the previous items mailed last week to you regarding the correspondence from the Site and Architecture Committee, the public hearing that they had, as well as the survey results. So just for discussion points, council can draw from those items.
All right, and Ms. Hamilton, did you want to make any comments?
No, I think I've said as much as I can in the past hearings, so I'm really available here for to answer any questions you may have, or if you really desire my professional opinion, I'd be more than happy to share it with you.
All right, thanks. Okay, so let's just open this up to council discussion. This is a matter that has come up before and was looked at and then ultimately sent back to Site and Architecture for further review. As Councilmember Makachuk indicated, there was a citywide survey conducted on this via Nextdoor, I believe, where there was general resident approval for the idea of increased fence heights to 7 feet, had a fairly high level of, quite high level of openness to that, as well as pretty significant openness to the possibility of opening to 8 feet fences, which would require engineering permits and plans, and would be a different level along certain properties, impacted commercial properties, properties bordering on commercial properties, schools and churches. And then the other consideration would be along certain busy streets and corridors. So with that kind of background, let's open this to council discussion, which will, the goal of which I believe is to see if we can begin to move towards bringing this back to council with some level of consensus about what it would look like. Councilmember Makachuk.
Thanks. What I think we should do, and this was through a conversation with our city attorney, he recommended that we give site and architecture a little more direction on what we'd like to see. And that's why I said I have no problem speaking tonight, because I think what we should do is send something back to site and architecture. And what I would propose that we send to site and architecture is allowing a 7-foot fence throughout the city as recommended by our planner, Ms. Hamilton. And then any exceptions over 7 feet would go to the Site and Architectural Commission for review and approval. And I don't think that we should, as we put such an ordinance into place, we should put any restrictions on it. It's the difference between 7 feet and 8 feet, and then let the conditions of the property go through the Site and Architectural Commission, and they should have some criteria that are explicit, objective criteria. And there's examples in our adjacent municipalities, including Saratoga, Los Gatos, etc., so that they could make the certain findings. So I'm not suggesting we do anything tonight in this meeting, but we should send it to the Site and Architectural Commission for review. And what I think we should propose is 7 feet throughout the city, up to 8 feet with the approval of Site and Architectural Commission, and take it from there.
All right, Councilmember Lawler.
All right, so just to be clear, I mean, last time this came up, the reason I was opposed to the 7 feet for everyone there were 2 reasons. One, our general plan states that they are to be 6 feet, with the 6 foot being lattice. And the reason that is to preserve the rural character of our community. So my concern with raising it to 7 feet for everyone is that over a 5 or 10 year period, we're going to have a hodgepodge of fence heights, which is then aesthetically going to damage, in my opinion, the rural character that the 6-foot fences are trying to preserve. I am not opposed to allowing a 7-foot or 8-foot fence for those properties that are the exceptions, the ones that are bordering commercial properties, county lines, public property, the church, city, you know. So I am not opposed to that because that makes sense. But for me personally, I'm just concerned about the aesthetics overall over a period of time, as well as, and we know some people can be okay with their fences being uneven sized, but I'm sure there are folks that might get a little aggravated if their neighbor puts up a fence on one side that's higher than the rest of the fence on the rest of their property, and therefore the onus is on that property owner to add another foot. So I'm concerned right now about that potential happening, and so I would suggest that we go ahead and focus on allowing, you know, upping the allowance to 7 feet with a lattice or whatever, or 8 feet for those certain properties, but not for the city as a whole. That would be my suggestion, to start small and then see how we go. Thanks.
All right.
I'll respond to one of the key points that you just made, Councilmember Lawler. I really like the rural character of Monte Sereno, but you know, there's changes over the years, and I think that we have to accept the changes that are made and listen to our residents. And when you look at the survey, you have to really, you know, see what they what they want, and they want a 7-foot fence, and in some circumstances they accept an 8-foot fence. And the reason is you've got changes. You've got ADUs, and ADUs, there are more and more of them. And I've had people contact me, one gentleman in particular, that said he put up his ADU and his neighbor, he has now alienated himself from his neighbor because his neighbor is so upset that his ADU is in compliance, but he has no, he quote, lost his privacy. He followed all the setbacks, etc. So ADUs are new, beach traffic is new. There's, I didn't send this out, but I could, but I've been reticent to because I don't want to be negative, but there's a, the discussion of a lawsuit, and I'm not sure which, the Paget lawsuit, which I really don't want to get into, but it goes into gory detail as to the genesis of what caused all the problems, and that all had to do with the fence height. And I think we need to get to the root cause of this and deal with it for once and for all, or not for once and for all. Step one, let's go 7 feet, site and architecture review to 8 feet before we start to put in specific exceptions that would apply citywide. Doesn't matter where you are, I think it should go to site and architecture. Sorry.
Right. Councilmember, let's go keep it moving. Councilmember Turner, you have your hand up.
Yes, I wanted to bring a different angle to this discussion, and that has to do with Monte Sereno being 30% in the high danger area. And if you were to take a CERT class, one of the things that firemen complain about is the ability to put out fires from one lot to the next if the fences are very high. And I am concerned about that, right? I think one of the things we need to do is to check with the fire department to really look at those issues. And perhaps our city manager can look and figure out where are the high fire areas in Monte Sereno.
All right. Councilmember Elahi, do you have comments?
Yeah, I think we're talking about a foot extra fence, and the lots, some of them are large enough. People are not going to be really affected as much. And rather than have require somebody to check up to see if the 7 foot is justified or not, it's easier just to say, okay, that's our rule. We're going to go 7 foot. Los Gatos is going 7 foot. I don't know where Saratoga is at. They might be at 7 feet also. So it'd be more consistent to eventually get there. ADUs require more privacy, so the 7 foot will give you more privacy in a sense. Also, people have swimming pools, and the 7 foot will give you some privacy for the swimming pool users. So I would suggest send it to SNA. The good question Mr. Councilwoman Turner raises about the fire people, what they think about it. Maybe they say Site and Architecture can contact them and ask them for their opinion, and see if that really makes a big difference for those guys. But let's move it up. I think the 8 foot fence, if it gets us permit requirements and make sure we put some fees on it. I like the memo drafted as to what Los Gatos is doing, and that's very helpful.
Okay, Councilmember Lawler.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention with in terms of privacy, I mean, we do have the ability to plant screening plants. Is that correct? So would it be, so I mean, I understand, I see your point about the ADUs, et cetera, but I guess really my concern is, I don't know. I think either way, we're going to get people that are upset about somebody building a fence, right? And so how it's we're damned if we do, damned if we don't. But I just want to make sure that, and I think Councilmember Turner brings an excellent point. We need to make sure that this isn't problematic for the fire department, particularly with our wild urban interface areas. And I'd also like to see what Site and Architecture thinks about the overall aesthetics. And if I would make one suggestion, and that would simply be that 7th foot be lattice. And I'm saying that because then that does provide a consistency in all of our fences. And if I can get that one caveat, I think that would be very helpful from a design aesthetic. I mean, that's sort of my thing. So thanks.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Turner.
I guess I forgot to bring my hands down.
Oh, okay. No problem. All right. So yeah, I remember this discussion from before, and a little bit of back and forth on the issue of lattice for the final foot. And I think it was Ms. Hamilton talked with us a bit about that, and what's the definition of a lattice, and how does it all work. But I hear you in terms of the design. If all of the fences suddenly increase to 7 feet and all of them are still the standard redwood design, it's a little more imposing and it's a little less friendly to the neighbors. Of course, we are talking about the back sides of people's houses. So this isn't the lean over the fence and talk to your neighbors kind of situation either. We're really talking about the overall view. But it did seem that when surveyed, there was a lot of appetite for 7 foot fences, and probably reflecting that people are a little bit frustrated that 6 is always a little bit on the low side. If you got a tall person or any kind of slope to the property or things, you really do see into the other person's yard, or the other person sees into your yard. So, and it does look like it is the trend. Right now, the ADUs is an interesting new issue. Quite frankly, I've looked at the church behind me and said, if anything were to ever be developed there, all I need to do to solve my problem is build an ADU, because I can make it 16 feet high. And that's realistically would protect the views of my pool. We don't really want people putting in ADUs for privacy when they could just put in a 7 foot fence. So this is, it's definitely an evolving area. And I hear what Councilmember Mekachek is saying, and Councilmember Lahi as well. I mean, we've got the trend towards more and more neighbors building things closer and closer to the lot lines than ever before. So I think the interesting comment about the fire access is important, though. And so if we can get Site and Architecture maybe to do some research, or if we can get city staff to do some research on that, talk to county fire protection and find out, because more and more cities are going to 7 feet as the standard. I think Los Gatos may already be there. How many people are doing it? Does it have an effect? Is it something that some areas should address and not others in terms of Monte Sereno? Or is it a big problem that other people are creating that we really shouldn't create for ourselves? So I think we can get more information, and Site and Architecture can help with that. Councilmember Turner, you still have your hand up?
Yes.
Okay.
Building an ADU for a fence, Mayor Luthold, you make too much money.
It's a net profit all the way around.
I will, may I speak?
Yes, go ahead.
I had the conversation with Mr. Paulson, and I documented that and sent it to everyone in a memo, because I thought that I shouldn't have any information that I don't share with the full council. So that's why I did that. But at the meeting when this was voted upon by council members Turner, Lawler, and Elahy, where you recused yourself, Mayor Luthold, I heard the question, what's changed and what's new? If it was good for 6 feet before, it should be good for 6 feet now. And what I pointed out in the memo, which Mr. Paulson said, was the change was in the building code that said you're allowed to build up to 7 feet without a building permit. And that changed for Los Gatos. So that's why they went from 6 feet to 7 feet. And it's only over 7 feet that you require a building permit, and you require a exception approval. And they charge for that, obviously. So, and if you look at the volumes that Mr. Paulson put in, it was what, 14 since 2018. So it's not overwhelming. And they estimate it takes between an hour and 2 hours to review an application, not on the building permit side, but on the exception application side. So I just thought that was new information that we did not have at the prior meeting, and or council didn't have because I wasn't part of council.
Yeah, thank you. And I actually found that information very interesting, where they have streamlined the process. They've made it easy to bring those exception requests and clear as to where they apply, and to see that it's been a very limited number. If we're looking at Los Gatos as 10 times as large, it looks like, I mean, we could have 1.4 of them in 3 years. So that's really, it doesn't look like people are taking advantage, certainly, of the exception to go to 8 feet on appropriate properties, even when that is an allowed exception and doesn't cost very much money. So it looks like people aren't doing the 8 feet without really good reason. And then the 7 feet, again, appreciate your input about the history of where that came from, which is the state changed the rules and now cities are aligning with the new allowance in the building code. So yeah, my thoughts are, I think generally what we're hearing and is we're ready to move forward to have Site and Architecture look at this further, which is it appropriate to go to 7 feet citywide? Should the 7th foot be more of a lattice style so that there is a little design? It's not going to be just these monolithic redwood slabs going up. That's something Site and Architecture is certainly qualified to look into and look at samples. Maybe even we create some samples about what's allowed and what's not allowed once we figure out what those might be. because a little bit of design does go a long way. And then the question, they can visit that and take the information from Los Gatos and maybe some other areas that have allowed these 8-foot exceptions and expand a little bit about what Councilmember Mekachek brought to us and see, could we consider simply having a citywide process for looking at exceptions, because it does bring us back to the Paget lawsuit where there was an 8-foot fence, and then there was an allegation that the inspector himself had an 8-foot fence, and all of these things. Maybe someone's lot was appropriate to an 8-foot fence and it shouldn't have been a big deal at the time, but yet it spirals completely out of control. So again, that's something that we can visit when we get there, whether those exceptions should only be allowed on specific pre-qualified areas, which would be totally reasonable, or whether they should be allowed citywide when conditions such as, and then a list of examples exist. So I think we can visit that again after Site and Architecture looks at it. We survey some more cities and really try to bring it to some sort of closure, and with a clear yes or a no, then we'll know what we're doing. Yes, Ms. Lawler.
Well, I guess my question is, does it really need to go back to Site and Architecture at this point? I mean, if we can agree that that extra foot is lattice, and I mean, I'm just procedurally wondering if Site and Architecture is going to be pleased with getting this back, or will they be able to help us out?
I will answer that one. Procedurally, it would be highly recommended, since the city's code now requires that the Site and Architecture Commission opine on any changes to city land use regulations.
Great, thanks.
I like it when there's an easy answer. Okay, so yeah, it sounds like we've put that back to them. We've given enough direction and information for them to investigate further, think about these things, and bring us their best thoughts, and then we can come back and make decisions.
Yeah, so from the staff perspective, I think Jeannie and I would like particular direction as to what ideas, or what the shape of an ordinance you would like the Site and Architecture to render a recommendation to you on. That would be what would be most helpful, I think, for city staff.
All right, and Ms. Hamilton has her hand up, so let's hear from her.
And I'm going to be very upfront with you as the council. I really need you guys to prioritize right now, because currently I'm a staff of one. I'm working on, in less than a week, we'll be getting responses to the RFPs for the SB2 grant work, which is a priority, the design guidelines and the subjective and objective standards work. I put an awful lot of work into this already. I'm working on environmental for another thing. I'm going to be having to get all the data together for the housing element reporting. I'm trying not to whine, but there's a lot on my plate right now. And if you want me to put some time into this, something's got to give. Or this is not going to get to Site and Architecture until, I don't know, maybe March. Again, this can't be done overnight. If I'm going to research this stuff, or the Los Gatos model is drastically different from what Site and Architecture does now. There's only 2 instances where they can consider an exception, and that's in the front and the side corner. The Los Gatos appears to say citywide, you got up to 7 feet. If you want anything higher than that, you can go up to 8, but it's got to be these exceptions. That's completely different. So I would have to do a little more research to see what other cities may do that, and try to anticipate whether or not the findings that Los Gatos has is sufficient. and whether or not site and I mean, I don't know. I put a lot of work into it already. I need you guys to prioritize and give me some timeline. Do you want it to go in February? That's not going to happen. March, that's possible. April, definitely. Given what else I'm working on as far as also trying to put an RFP together for the general plan and housing element stuff. So we've got a lot of housing priorities right now.
All right, I appreciate the input, Ms. Hamilton. I have an idea, which is one that we have used in the past when staff had limitations and the council wanted to move something forward. Then we put together an ad hoc committee, and the ad hoc committee would run with that ball. Now we can't do that here tonight because that requires notice, but we could slip it on to the next week. We could conceivably draft Councilmember Makachek and Councilmember Lawler, as they have kind of the different opinions here, make them work together on the ad hoc committee if they were willing. And then they can do the reviews of available standards in other cities and how what Ms. Hamilton has done so far would be either slightly modified and then perfect for Monte Sereno with a few changes, or whether we should be adopting something quite different and exactly what it would look like so that it doesn't burden staff in the same way at all. Is that something that people are interested in doing?
That I think that's a great idea, Mayor Leupold. I would look forward to being appointed to an ad hoc committee to work with Councilmember Lawler. And in terms of the timeline that was discussed by Ms. Hamilton, I think that we could probably have something on the March site and architecture that would be in reasonably good form. But if you know there's other competing priorities, and depending on what's on site architecture's plate, we could move that to April. But I think we could make March. What do you think, Ms. Lawler?
Yeah, I think that that would be. I look forward to it. That's a good alternative, Mayor Leupold.
All right. Well, obviously we can't act on that tonight, but we can bring it on to the next agenda and probably move very quickly. And certainly, I mean, from my ad hoc committee's points of view, Ms. Hamilton's interest in SB2 is wonderful, and I'm looking forward to working with her on on the SB2 and then where that leads us into the general plan. So that really is a huge priority. And it's not that this is a distraction. We just don't have the staff power to do this. And so let's solve it if we can by making the council members carry laboring oar. So that sounds like a plan. And then we don't have to worry about staff needing immediate direction because the ad hoc committee will work on creating that direction, creating the structure. So if that's okay, do we have some nods? I need to see at least 3 nods. Okay, sounds good. We got 5 nods, that's good. Okay, so let's bring that as a future agenda item. I won't repeat it when we come to future agenda items. Let's just place it here under the direction to bring that to the creation of an ad hoc committee to address the fence ordinance. Okay, so that ends item number 10. And let's move to item number 11, the discuss and accept calendar year 2021 City Council Agenda Working Calendar. City Manager, you have a report?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Leupold. So this evening, before you, staff has provided a calendar that gives an overview of the year of all of the future agenda items, the general business items that come at various times of the year on a regular basis. We did handle one aspect earlier this evening, which was one of the steps involved with the weed abatement. And if you look at the calendar, you can see early on the January 5th meeting, the January 19th meeting tonight, the February 2nd meeting. There are many items piled up on those meetings, and that is because those are the most imminent meetings coming forward. And as you can see, as things get towards March, there are some holes. But as we proceed through the year, all these dates will get filled in more with more business and more agenda items. It's just that we put the essential or the regular business items in the calendar just to provide a template so council would have an idea of what will be coming up in the near future and the very distant future. And I am available for questions or comments.
Council members, questions, comments? Looks like everybody's tired and getting more and more agreeable based on that.
I'm happy to continue to update the calendar along with Ms. Radcliffe throughout the year and provide it to council on a sometimes weekly, sometimes more than weekly basis, but on a regular basis. So everybody knows what's coming up.
All right, sounds good. Councilmember Turner?
Yes, what's the action item here? Is it to fill in this calendar for next week, for next meeting, or the 16th?
No, the action item is really to take a look at the format and be aware of the working calendar and the nature of it, I believe. No particular action item other than to look at the structure and format and then just recognize that this is going to be an ongoing work in progress.
Thank you, Mayor. And it was also, as you mentioned, an informational item, and someone on council suggested we put this on the agenda. I believe it was at our last meeting. So I think that's how this came about. But in any event, informational only.
And Councilmember Mekachek, you made a motion towards making, raising your hand.
I just wanted to ensure that you get the budget on there so it meets one of your goals, Mayor Luthold.
Yeah, thank you. That is something I did want to point out. I didn't look carefully at this and work backward from the required adoption date for the budget. But since I've been on council, it's always been that the budget was a last minute push, that the council felt a little bit that we didn't get enough input and that we were being under time pressure at the very end. So one of the working issues for the goal setting this year that I'm going to be looking at is making sure that we start the budget process earlier. And I would love to see the budget process. I'd actually like to see the budget adopted at the final adoption of the budget, a meeting before the deadline for it, in case we need to have issues that slip out. So I think we should see about scheduling it that way and working towards that date. Not the last date for the budget, but that we could adopt, but at least one meeting before. That'll put us ahead of a whole lot of other cities. The city clerk has her hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to note on May 18th, we have a budget study session part 1 scheduled. And then June 1st, we have the study session part 2 scheduled with the adoption on June 16th.
Right, but June 16th being the date that we have to adopt a budget doesn't allow us any slippage at all. So
okay, I understand.
I think given, thank you for pointing out the dates. I think what I would be looking at ideally would be to pull everything back one meeting if it's doable. That would then leave us the ability to slip a week if we needed to make major revisions as we move towards final.
Okay, so should I tentatively put down the first budget study session for May 4th, the second one on May 18th, have a budget discussion on the 1st with approval on the 16th?
I would even say approval on the 1st. and with a placeholder in the event of significant changes, last date to adopt budget on the 16th.
Okay, perfect.
Now, I'm just saying that I don't have any concurrence from council members. I'm not getting nods. Okay, we've got nods on that, at least as a, again, as a tentative layout as we're talking about the calendaring. If it turns out that that doesn't work, then obviously we can adjust the calendar on the fly.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. So that finishes the issue of the working calendar. We now move to the section for council member comments generally. Then we'll have the city manager reports, and then we'll have future agenda items. I know they sometimes run together, but let's go with council member comments. Yes, council member Lawler.
I just wanted to talk about these weekly meetings I'm having with the county regarding COVID measures. And I just wanted to bring forward that the county is putting together something called the COVID Ambassadors Program, where they are looking for members of the community to serve as ambassadors to get the word out on, and true word, I mean, verifiable, reliable information regarding vaccines and testing. And they're looking for, whether it's our people in the youth commission, people in the church, people at the schools, or any other members of the community that would like to be a part of it, that are trusted sources of information for our residents. And I have information that I will send our city manager, and hopefully something like that will get posted on the website. Thanks.
Anyone else? Council member comments? Not seeing any, but I guess seconding the post on the websites, I think outreach on Nextdoor when the time comes as well would be appropriate for that, for the COVID ambassadors, obviously, to try to reach out and see who's particularly active and trusted. We might be able to get those people to contact you, and then you can do some screening for that. Do you have an idea of how many ambassadors they're looking towards for each community?
Well, countywide, they're looking for 500 to 1,000. And that's among the 15 cities. So given the size of our city, anything that we can come up with would be good.
Okay. So it sounds like, I mean, they're open to several people for sure from Monte Sereno getting involved.
Absolutely.
All right. Okay, Councilmember Lahi.
Yeah, I thought I'd just pass on the Silicon Valley Clean Energy. They've come up with a program for people who are missing their, can't make their electric payments to qualify, to give them up to $8,000 off on their debts. So that's going to start next, probably in February. And also they're offering about a $50 rebate on induction cooktops. So I'll send the information on to Mr. Linares. He can take a look at it and see if we can post that also. Also, I'm happy to report I'm on the executive committee now on the Silicon Valley Clean Energy Board. So hopefully we can get more funding from them for our cities.
All right, great. Anyone else on comments and reports? None yet. Okay, city manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor Luthold. I just wanted to bring to the council's attention that Monte Sereno is being selected again as a potential site for COVID-19 testing. And we are looking at January 30th as being a possible date. So I will get the details to councils and out to the community if that is to occur. So Monte Sereno residents can register in advance, and they are talking about blocking out a 2-hour window for us during a potentially a 12-hour day of testing at our facility here for Monte Sereno residents exclusively. So we will work on getting the details out on that to the community. And I will be meeting with the police chief tomorrow. So if anybody on council wants to have me pass along some information or some questions for the chief, I'm happy to do so. Please send me an email tonight or tomorrow morning. And we will be covering a number of topics, and as well as what was discussed at our last council meeting about the incident in downtown Los Gatos. And last but not least, I believe we are going to be receiving the Tree City Award from the National Arbor Day Foundation. So we're looking forward to that. Not confirmed yet, but will be soon. That concludes what I have this evening. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Actually, this will now move to future agenda items, but it relates to my first comment about future agenda items relates to the discussion you may be having with the Chief of Police. We've received a request from a resident that I passed along related to considering an ordinance enforcing mask use in the city of Monte Sereno. And that person's hope is that maybe Los Gatos could follow along and get on board with us, and we could get the police department as potentially enforcing, but more important, we could put some signs around that says that there is such an ordinance and that people need to wear their masks. It looks like mask use is way up. It looks like there's going to be some more stuff going on nationally, but if we should consider putting that on a future agenda if it's appropriate. I don't know if other council members think that that should come on the agenda and come on, given that we're pretty full for the next couple of weeks in terms of agenda items. And also I'd be interested in having the police chief view of that in light of them serving both Los Gatos and Monte Sereno.
I had someone reach out to me and say that that's very important and that Monte Sereno should take some leadership. And I believe it's the same person that sent in the email. So I would support that, and I'll volunteer some time to do whatever's required to help with that.
All right. Any other comments on that, Councilmember Lawler?
Well, I wasn't going to comment on that, but I have a future agenda item.
Okay. I guess before we get to that, do we have a consensus that mask ordinance should be brought on and promptly as an agenda item? I'm for going ahead and bringing it in. I obviously don't want to burden staff. So if Councilmember Makachek can work with the city manager and find a model ordinance, I think there was the resident had proposed following Carmel's.
I do. Okay, so I do have a comment. So I think that the resident was requesting a mask ordinance in the event that Monte Serenans can't maintain more than 6 feet of distance. But I'm questioning, we don't have any businesses. And so where does that exactly apply? And how is it enforced? I mean, those are just common sense questions, right? So I'm just had to bring that up.
Yeah, no, it is more a symbolic matter. And we probably do want to say mask when cannot maintain 6 feet of distance, so that not every person who's exercising or every person who's walking a dog on an empty street has to have their mask pulled up at all times. But I think that would go to the crafting of the ordinance. And of course, we'd talk about the question, should it be everyone at all times when outdoors with an exception for exercise or no exceptions? I mean, these are things that we could discuss. Again, probably don't want to burden staff with it, but if somebody wants to put forward a model that we could then promote, it really, the citizen's suggestion was that as much as anything, it's not about saying that Monte Sereno is doing it wrong. It's about leaning on Los Gatos to get their act together, because they're just not doing the enforcement. Downtown, not just at the rallies, but in general, is pretty ridiculous with people not wearing masks. I understand that there's plenty of denial and plenty of people are frustrated, but it's reached the point where I don't go downtown anymore because so many people are out and so many people are unmasked. It's not worth bothering with. So this is about leaning on Los Gatos as much as anything.
Okay.
So that's for the city manager to talk to the police chief and maybe contacts in the city over there about as well. That if they don't get their act together, we're going to have to show them how it's done. So, Ms. Lawler, you had other future agenda items?
Well, I did. I wanted to bring up, I don't know if anyone else has noticed, I have leaf blowers gotten exceedingly loud lately. I think there's a new motor out there. This is something I know that we've talked about before. Is it possible to maybe have a discussion about maybe limiting the decibel size or something? I know that there's residents that complain, and they've gotten very loud. I think there's a new kind out that's very, very loud, and our healthy cities and our green initiative. So I don't know if this is something we could bring up at a future on a non very busy meeting.
Yeah, I think that we did talk about that before as to whether it's a gas versus electric, and I think we reached a consensus that it's really a decibel level, and I'm all for bringing that forward. Again, if we can save the work of finding a model that is about right, and then bring it to the council, and we can adjust it a little bit and just get it done. That we don't want to impose this as additional work on staff, although if Steve's available to help out with surveying, finding a model that works, I think the city manager does have some contacts that might be able to feed us some models, and then we can take a look as a city council without burdening staff again until we're ready to move on it.
Yes, and I think that is possible. It, as Councilmember Lawler did mention, it probably would pertain more to our noise ordinance versus anything else. In Los Gatos, they did ban gasoline-powered leaf blowers. In Saratoga, they did it, and I believe Cupertino also did it based on noise level, which may limit the gasoline-powered blowers. There are alternatives now that are better and perhaps more environmentally friendly than those gasoline leaf blowers, which drive a lot of people on the edge because they're loud and they smell. The only other thing that could come up is the enforcement, and the city, or excuse me, the town of Los Gatos would be the enforcement mechanism on the leaf blowers, and that it might be best to model our ordinance after their ordinance because they are already familiar with it. And then residents would probably like to weigh in as well, because some people really prefer those gasoline leaf blowers, despite the fact that they are allowed because they have large parcels of land. So there's a lot of things to consider, but I will work with neighboring agencies and Mr. Rudin on this to find out what we could put together to draft an ordinance for council to adopt.
Great, thank you. And actually, you have a good point about residents, and we've had some talk on and off about more surveys and more resident involvement when it may be helpful, and we can really let them know that they're getting an opportunity to weigh in. This might be one, if we can craft something at some point for a survey and get some input from the residents. Anyone else for future agenda items? All right, running late here, so with nothing further, we will adjourn until the next meeting. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
Everyone, good night.